All right. Welcome everybody into episode number 2 of Audacity Sports Talk, where we have the Audacity. And I have the friend of mine on here is a really good friend of mine who is full of audacity. That's for sure. And he's gonna bring it. And we're gonna talk primarily Mets, as you can tell by my background. And we'll get into that here in a second. But Anthony, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you coming on. And we had some fun technical difficulties, but guess what? That's part of the landscape, right? And
Yeah, for real.
I'd like to just welcome you on. And if
Thanks,
you
man.
want to let us know, when did you become a Mets fan and why?
I've been a Mets fan forever. My father is the reason why. I remember we went to more than one game at Shea Stadium when I was a kid.
Right.
And yeah, it's just for better or worse, you inherit the fandom of your parents, right?
Right.
So I've inherited the Mets and been suffering for much of that time, with brief moments of happiness, right? 86, 88,
Plenty.
2000,
Plenty
that's
of
about it.
misery, that's for sure. Well,
lying.
yeah, that's how I became a Mets fan. My dad was a Mets fan and passed it on to me, and I started watching baseball in '86, so worked out for me.
Yeah, that's a good time to start, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, who is your favorite Met of all time?
When I was younger, it was Keith Hernandez, 100%.
All right.
100%. The way he fielded, the way he can hit,
Yeah.
He had that little I don't care attitude going on.
Yes, he did.
Do what I want.
Yes, he did.
So I love that. And then when I got a little older, Piazza, because he was just, probably the best Met that I've seen.
Yeah.
Best player wearing that jersey.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely can make an argument for that, for sure. I'm a phase type of guy. Like I had a couple of Mets that were my favorite. Initially, it was Darryl Strawberry. I used to love Darryl Strawberry. It was just amazing in the '80s and the early '90s, and then I transitioned into, believe it or not, Todd Hundley.
Hundley was no joke back in the day, man. People forget how good he was. He had that 2-3 year stretch, man. He was probably the best catcher in
40
baseball.
home runs. Yeah, he was good, and he was an amazing Met at that time, I thought. And until I have a Todd Hundley story. So I took my brother, who could care less about sports, to be honest, to a baseball game when I think he was 5. So I think I had to be 17. And I took him to Queens, and we went to Shea, and we left the game. Mets got blown out, of course. So we left early, right? And we're walking out the side, and for some reason, I think Hundley wasn't playing or something was going on, but basically he was leaving the stadium as we were leaving, right? Mind you, it's like the 7th a.m. He's like walking out, and he's smoking a cigarette, right? Which blew my mind. Like, I was like, is this guy smoking a cigarette? Oh, all right, whatever. And so I stopped. I'm like, hey, Todd. I'm like, what's up, man? Can you sign a baseball for my brother? It wasn't for my brother. My brother could care less, right? It was for me. But, you had to use him. And he said no. He said no. And I said, all right. On the shelf you go. And I moved on to Piazza and then David Wright. So those are my favorite Mets.
Yeah, all those guys are good.
Yeah.
Piazza, I have a similar story because we went spring training. This was back, I want to say 2003, 4, something like that. And so Piazza was still on the team, and we went to go see they were playing Baltimore.
Right.
And it was at Baltimore's spring training stadium.
Okay.
So Piazza's walking down the left field line towards the dugout. He makes a left turn to walk across the infield, so he didn't have to get close to the stands.
Wow.
So he wouldn't have to sign anything for any of the kids that were sitting there. I was like, yo, man.
Man.
That's brutal. A little cruel. That's rough,
brutal, man. He made a U-turn. All right, well, yeah, it happens. I guess
there was another time. I was outside of work. This was at 9 West 57th Street.
Okay.
And I was outside that building, and who goes walking right past? Right in front of me was Jose Reyes.
Oh, nice.
Two things with that. He was real
Probably
cool.
hitting the club.
Probably. I mean, it was, there's nothing over there. He should have been down that way, whatever.
I
So,
lived on 57th Street, believe it or not, back in the day. But yeah.
but he was walking around with him and a buddy, and two things struck me. He was real cool, and there's no way he's 6'1".
Yeah, I always you know what? I always had a question about that because he is 6'1", and even at the plate, he just didn't have that 6'1" look.
I'm 5'7".
Yeah, he's
right?
probably 5'10", 5'11".
No, we were close to eye to eye, man. He was maybe 5'9", 5'10" tops.
Yeah,
I was like,
I think he
you're
got
not 6'1", bro.
Yeah, that's 6'1" that had me all the time. Yeah, he was a cool Met, man. He was cool in spring training when I'd go. I'd see him and he shot his name. He'd always look back and give you a head nod. Coolest Met all time though, because I think I went to 10 years in a row of spring training, was Curtis Granderson.
Curtis Granderson's a good guy.
The nicest guy ever, man. Like, he'd take the time. The ball could be in the air, and he's tracking it. You're like, Curtis, like, what's up, dog? All right, and he catch the ball, Like, that's the kind of guy he was, man. So I always liked him as a Met, as just as a guy. He was a cool dude. Yeah, so, I just wanted to kind of give a little background on, Mets fandom, because I think you're one of the few people I know that are actual Met fans, like actual Met fans, right? Not the casual Met fan. Sometimes I talk to somebody, my dad's one too, but you talk to somebody, you're like, yeah, I'm a Mets fan. I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, and they bring up like Ed Kranepool. I'm like, all right, man, we're done. That's enough of that. Rusty Staub. I'm like, nah, man, all right, that's enough of that. So, so let's transition into like fast forwarding now. And I know you're into you've written for websites and you're really into fantasy. Whooped my butt a few times. Took money out of my kids' mouths. My kids didn't eat for a few weeks, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I know what's your take on baseball, right? And the wave of analytics.
I think if used properly and not as the gospel, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really there's more that we don't know about the game that can be learned through some of these more advanced metrics, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the old school thinking of the ways to play, like bunting,
Right.
hitting behind a runner, like to ground out on purpose to get the guy from second to third, things like that are just, if you only get 3 outs in an inning, the other team should be happy to take that out, right?
Right.
So it's things like that where, sometimes you can it gets a little in the weeds, and a lot of the, the more casual fans are going to kind of glaze over. You're talking about, use, especially like some of the fielding metrics, like UZR and things like that. People are like, what?
Yeah.
Like I'm watching a guy, it looks like he can field, but you're telling me that he can't. What do you mean? So some of that stuff, it gets a little bit too in the weeds, but the defensive metrics are a little newer. Those will take some refining. The batting metrics, especially, especially something like WAR, which is pretty basic, but is all encompassing, and you can go back in time. So it's a retro kind of stat. I think that really kind of because baseball's a lot of, you want to be able to compare, right?
Sure.
How would Willie Mays do playing today? How would Ted Williams do playing today? How would Mike Trout do playing back then? WAR, and especially WAR plus, which kind of evens everything out. A lot of the plus stats I love, because what they do is they even out field, era, things like that, and they allow you to just look at a guy versus another guy with a basic number.
Right.
OPS plus, things like that, right? So some of that stuff is really, really cool. Some of it's a little out there for some people. So I get the pushback, because you're never gonna be able to get away from, this is what my eyes see, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's cool, man. Like I've kind of come around to it. Initially, I was kind of like that. I'm not a baseball purist by any means. I do like some of the stuff that baseball has always had going for it, right? But I'm not necessarily stuck on baseball being absolutely the way it's always been, right? But then when the analytics started to come around, I was like, yeah, and then Billy Bean got a lot of notoriety for that, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
and the Moneyball thing, and I was like, come on, I kind of got a little bit like get off my lawn type of feel to it, and I was like, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it. That guy's good. I'm watching him. I've seen guys like him. Don't tell me about war. Don't tell me about anything. But I've kind of come around to it now. I think like you said, when used properly, right? Because I think some GMs and some people who are baseball people, they just rely only on that, and I think that can get you in trouble. And because sometimes you
still
just
need
got
to
to see a
watch.
guy.
You still need to watch a guy play. In my
Right.
mind, I think.
Yeah.
And what the advanced stats will do will maybe shine something out that you miss if you see a guy play once or twice, because you're not going to see everything. Seeing a guy a couple times. So if you see him and you see certain things, like a perfect example is we live in Jacksonville, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Marlins AA team
Yep.
is in Jacksonville. Went to see them once, and Monty Harrison was the center fielder.
Center fielder. Yep.
Mm-hmm. That guy to me looked like a baseball player.
Yes,
right?
I watched him play. Yeah, he did.
But he played that game that I saw, and he couldn't hit anything. Like if I was pitching, he couldn't hit, right? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, so I went back and I kind of looked at his numbers, and that was his problem. His problem was he cannot make contact. Well, he worked on that, and last year, all of a sudden, he was making a lot more contact. So now the body, the speed, the power that you could see he has, all of a sudden now started to show in games.
Yeah.
When the year I saw him, it wasn't there. So he was all just projectable stuff at that point.
You know who I think
a scout would
like...
see that guy, right? The scout would look at him and be like, man, that's a ball player. But it didn't translate.
Right. I think a guy who probably would have been like a perfect candidate for like, let's see what stats or let's see what analytics are going to say. Like, you remember Last Things Millage?
That's
right.
Honestly, when I saw Harrison, I thought of Millage. I did, because there's a lot of similarities. He just had all the
tools, right?
Yes,
he was an athletic freak. Like I was a typical idiot Mets fan, right? Like I was excited, like this guy's gonna be the man. And I remember he got in trouble with like the fans because he was being a little like showboatish, right?
Yep.
And baseball doesn't do that, right? So like, and I remember that I was like, he's gonna be good, man. There's no doubt about it. And then like, if we would have listened to the numbers, nothing.
Yeah.
Or Greg Jeffries.
I was gonna say Greg Jeffries is a perfect example of that too. I mean, that dude could hit, always hit.
Yeah.
But till he got to the majors, then he didn't hit. And
then you got the opposite, right? A guy like Daniel Murphy, who probably slid under the radar, played at JU here locally, and most people will go, "Who?" Right? But the dude could just stroke.
Well,
but the Mets didn't think so.
He didn't hit with the Mets. He hit for 1 month with the Mets.
He had a good month. That was a crazy month, though. I mean, got us to the World Series. You could argue he got us to the World Series.
Yeah, no, you can argue that. And I still am just fine with not giving him that contract, because I believe to this day he never would have hit. He never would have hit for the Mets like he hit for the Nationals.
Right.
Never
the problem with the Mets is I don't ever, like, sometimes I don't have problems with the moves. I have problems with the reason why they made the move, right? Yep. It's like, we didn't sign him, but not because you weren't being smart. It's because you were being cheap.
Yep.
Right? So you luck into a lot of decisions when you're the Mets sometimes,
Oh, 100%. I mean, look, would the Yankees have signed Daniel Murphy? They had a chance to, and they didn't, right? So there were big market teams that passed on him. But that's not the reason why the Mets passed on him, because they were a big market team that saw a flaw. They saw a $50 million price tag and didn't want to pay it, right?
No. Yeah, the Mets get agita, man. You start talking millions, they're like, oh, boy.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Yeah, so speaking of which, I like to transition now into the state of the Mets. I really feel like we have a really good ball club, to be honest. On paper, will that translate? I don't know. A lot of stuff has happened with Thor getting hurt and being out for years. So I want to see what you think about the Mets, if there is a season, how they're going to fare.
Well, I mean, on paper, like you said, I mean, I think we have a top 3 to 5 roster in the National League. I don't think there's really any argument about that. Problem is, 2 of those other teams are also in our division, right? So that makes it real tough. So that you're probably looking at a wild card fight with one of those other teams plus, Cubs or Arizona or, whoever pops in the West, Milwaukee, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard, but beyond all that, I mean, it's an older team, right? Which I don't necessarily have a problem with. We've talked about this before when our pitchers were younger and cheap because they were all on, rookie contracts, minimum, right? We should have at that point in time built a veteran offense around those pitchers, a veteran closer, not Familia who gave you a heart attack every time out, right? Yeah. And so you would maximize the youth and the talent on the pitching staff.
But we signed Jay Bruce
twice.
Never mind.
That's a sore spot. Don't do it.
Yeah, I know. We'll give up the boy for him.
So you make a move like the Cano Diaz trade.
Yeah.
And you traded away arguably a guy who's going to be a top 5 prospect in all of baseball, plus your best pitching prospect, because you had to take on Cano's contract to get Diaz.
Yep.
Now, the problem I had with that is 2 things. First of all, you got Cano, who now blocks McNeil. So now McNeil is blocking J.D. Davis.
Blocking somebody at third, yep.
Because J.D. Davis should be playing third every day.
Yeah.
But he can't because McNeil has to play every day.
Right.
And he can't play second, which is his natural position, because Cano has to play.
Right.
The Mets will not pay him 15 or 18, 20 something, whatever he's making, to be on the bench. It's not going to happen. He'll play every day, as long as he's not hurt or whatever. And then you make that trade for a closer, which you don't make that type of trade for a closer. You don't trade your best prospect for a closer.
Not for a closer.
So that's the biggest. So, yeah, maybe that gives us a good roster for a couple of years, but Kalenic could have a good roster for 10.
Well, yeah.
That's the problem I have.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, they made some good signings. I went back and forth, this on Betances, because I thought the injury was going to be worse. Turned out not to be as bad.
I love Betances. That was a great signing, I thought.
Yeah.
Made the most sense for that
7, 8,
team.
9. If Diaz is Diaz 2 years ago, right? And then you have Betances staying true to form, and you have Familia somewhat competent, 7, 8, 9 is pretty dangerous, I think, as a bullpen.
And you're not even talking about Seth Lugo and Selman, right?
Yeah.
But Lugo might be the best pitcher in that bullpen.
Right. Who's confused because he thinks he should be starting, but.
Well, look, I think the most middle relievers want to start, right?
Right.
But Lugo had a 5 ERA when he was a starter. He's not a starter, right?
Simmer down.
So it's like, be successful. You're gonna have a nice long career, in the major leagues. Just own it. It's all right. There's nothing wrong with that.
And I get it. He's probably trying to make that starting money, versus the middle reliever money. So I understand, but. Yeah, I think bullpen-wise, we should be all right. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, this season, right? So, me, myself, I've always been a proponent of 162 games being too much. That's just me. I like watching baseball. It's tough these days. Now, I know they put in some rules to try to, speed up the pitchers, but, guys are still stepping out of the box and adjusting their jock strap about 15 times and doing a couple of glove tightenings. And, it's fun for, April, May, and then June. But I guess it's probably a combination of that plus my team normally being out of it by June, Yeah. So, I think 162 games is too much. But, with everything going on right now, and I'm talking about a possible shortened season, I just wanted to see what you thought on that.
I think it's a couple of things, right? I think 162 is a lot. But it's also something where it's not much longer than a hockey season, or it's only slightly longer than a football season in terms of number of months, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So 6 months of a baseball season. Football is what, September to December. So 3 months. So
Yeah.
it's halftime, right? You know,
Yeah,
hockey
playoffs
goes
January.
8 months.
Right.
Hockey's 8 months.
Yeah, hockey's.
Basketball is 6-7 months. So I don't know that it's necessarily the length of the season. I think it's the time of the games that is an issue. And I don't think a lot of what Major League Baseball has done to address that will help much, because I think the biggest problem is what you see in football. I think what you have is commercial breaks and timeout causing, like, football is a perfect example. I read something where there's about 15 minutes of real action in a football game.
Yeah.
Right? But a football game will
Yeah.
last 3 hours. It's similar in baseball. How much do we really need 15 minutes or 10 minutes in between innings, right?
Right.
Probably not. You know what I mean?
No,
It's so,
definitely not.
you know, the whole 3 batter minimum that they're trying to do is all it's going to do is really aggravate real fans and not help bring new fans to the game. Because in the end, you're either a baseball fan or you're not. You either like the game or you don't.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, baseball's doing what they can, Major League Baseball, the commissioner, to make it a niche sport instead of being more popular.
I think it's tough with the. I think socially it's tough for baseball because of the way the game is played and the way they normally have gone about the business. Because, you know, I think there's been a big thing in the last few years in the baseball community about Mike Trout not being marketed, right? That's the guy that, like, arguably is the best baseball player in the league, right? And on average, probably three out of 10 people know who he is, right? If that, right? If that. And, you know, NBA, you could take a guy that's 11th on the bench and you probably know who he is because he's got an Instagram account, right?
Yep.
He got House of Highlights playing a highlight of him crossing up his dog on the driveway. Like, it's just like basketball and football have like really, I think, gone like side by side with society and with the social media era, where baseball is kind of just like, I don't even know who has a Twitter account. Dor does. He's probably the only Met, I think, that's the type of person that's adjusting.
Pete Alonso has been fantastic.
Yeah.
He's been great. All last year, this entire, you know, pandemic period, he's been out there. I think one thing I read, this was a little while ago, not too long ago. They did a top 10 athletes under 30. And they post it every year. I only came across it randomly last month, and there was only one baseball player on it.
Wow.
This year was Christian Yelich. 2 years ago, it was Salvador Perez. He was the only baseball player on that list. Wow. Now, I thought he was 35, not 28. That's the first thing. But even worse,
he might be 35.
Well, he might be 30.
You know,
I think
that's possible. It's very possible that he's 35 for sure.
But it's a damning thing to baseball that, how is he your only guy? You know, it's rough.
Oh, sorry. Went on mute there for a second. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I think it's just, how do you fix that when at the top, I don't think there's a care to fix it. Because, you know, you and I know the owners, they're making their money.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's very interesting what's happening now, right? There are no games. So what the players have done is they've gone themselves, and like MLB The Show, right, is a big video game. It's on PlayStation. And they have a players-only league.
Right,
and
I saw that.
They put it up on YouTube. And these guys,
they have to do that.
And Slack, they have to do it themselves, but people are following it by the millions.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that the league should be looking at and saying,
right,
wow, people want to know these guys. People want to get to know these guys.
Yeah. I mean, look at the NBA. They did a horse. It was terrible.
Doesn't matter.
Absolutely terrible. But they're putting their guys out there, right?
Right.
Now people know who, even if you didn't know who Zach LaVine was or Conley was, now you know. I mean,
Right.
yeah, and MLB is just like whatever. Like a guy like you said, P. Alonso in the media right now, he'd be a star if he wasn't playing baseball.
Yeah.
His personality, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on, bud, and sharing some of that. Of course, you're going to be on here a lot more, and we'll
Yeah, I'm looking
definitely
forward to
talk.
that.
We'll talk some football, talk some all kinds of stuff. Yeah, could do some MMA. We'll switch it up.
You don't lose me on that one, but we can talk about
That's
stuff.
okay. You can make believe. Yeah.
I'll
All right,
pretend.
man.
All
Appreciate
right,
you
man.
coming on, buddy.
Take it
Talk to
easy.
you
Good
later.
talking to you.
All right, later.
All right.